Hi everyone, I've got a Beatles related story for you today that I guarantee you've never heard before. It concerns a painting that you might have seen before, and this story goes right to the heart of the Beatles Apple Empire. It's all to do with this painting. Now this is a print that I managed to get a few weeks ago, and for reasons that will become clear as we go through this story, I'm not allowed to tell you where I got this from, unfortunately. I really hope that can change in the future, but as things stand, I can't. I also wasn't allowed to buy this, again for reasons that will become clear. So this painting was made originally as an 8-foot wide painting. As I say, this is just a print of it, in the early 1980s by an artist from York in England called Lionel Barry Agar. You might have seen him credited as Barry Agar in certain books that this has been in. I'm going to refer to him as Lionel because that's the name that was used when I've corresponded with him just recently. So before I go on to tell you the incredible story of this painting, I just want to basically just sort of go through it first with you and get you a good close-up of what's on here. The detail is astonishing. It really is something that you could look at for months and still pick up new things from. It's very much a left to right painting. It starts off in the early days of the Beatles and then progresses through the era as we move along to the far right hand side. You'll see over on the left hand side we've got early childhood pictures of the Beatles, but not just John, Paul, George and Ringo. You'll see that there's some images of Pete Best there. We've got Stuart Sutcliffe in there as well. There's Brian Epstein, there's George Martin. Now one thing that's worth mentioning on here is that Lionel wanted all four of the Beatles to be given equal showing on this painting, and there are 55 images each of John, Paul, George and Ringo. So 220 John, Paul, George and Ringos all together on here. You'll see as it sort of slowly moves towards the right, we start to get some colour, because it's kind of mirroring the story really, you know, all that footage, the really early footage that we see, it's nearly all black and white, and as the 60s unfolded, things became a lot more colourful and vivid, and this painting absolutely reflects that. It goes through the eras. We've got Rubber Soul there, we've got them collecting their MBEs. There's a really interesting bit in the middle here where you'll see there is an Apple Corps, obviously for the Beatles Apple Corps company. But if you look closely, you'll see that it's made out of, the actual core shape is made out of an image of John's face and Paul's face. There's some other really interesting things here that I would never have picked up on, but Lionel, in emails that I've had via his daughter, he hasn't got his own email address, has pointed out things that, yeah, I just never would have picked up on. So, for example, if we see down towards the bottom right-hand side, there's an image there of John on the phone. If we move up towards the top of the picture, you'll see there's an image of Paul on the phone. This was intended to represent distance between John and Paul after they'd broken up. A lot of communications between them, lawyers and such like, being sort of telephone rather than face to face. So that's intended to convey that. Just next to that picture of Paul, there's an image of John and it says Mr. K in there, but obviously from Mr. Kite. But if you look at it a bit more closely, as I probably never would have noticed, that image is in the shape of a kite, and you've got the ribbons coming down from the bottom of the kite there. Also up near the top, we've got the words "Good News" there, obviously from lyrics from Savoy Truffle. Next to that, you've got Eric Clapton, his guitar going through the Wonderwall to Pattie Boyd, representing the husbands-in-law, George and Eric. And then also up in this top right hand corner, again, you've got various people connected with the Beatles. You've got Billy Preston there, there's Pattie, there's Jane Asher, there's Phil Spector, there's Cynthia, Maureen, Ravi Shankar, Alan Klein, they're all there. If we just move backwards a little bit, we've got an image of John's psychedelic Rolls Royce there. And if you go in close, you can see that it's got the names of each of the four Beatles' parents on there, and the children who were around during the Beatles era, so Julian, Zach and Jason. The original title that Lionel intended for this painting was going to be Fly Away Peter, Fly Away Paul. And from that, his intention was, if you look at the left hand side, you'll see in the middle there Pete Best. This was supposed to represent the Beatles, John, Paul, George and Ringo, as they were from the moment when Peter flew away until the moment on the far right hand side where Paul flew away and went solo and the Beatles split up. But he changed his mind eventually and called it the Trojan Horse. And I'll just read these words that Lionel sent to me about the Trojan Horse. He says, "It stems from a remark that John Lennon made, which I paraphrase as follows. We dressed smartly, we sang songs everyone liked, we were embraced by the public as lovable, only to influence the young generation to rebel and pave the way for a new dawn of rock-pop movements. This invasion I took as a metaphor for the Trojan Horse." So the picture itself, brilliant, and as soon as I finish doing this video it's definitely going up on my wall, but as I say, there's a story behind this that's even more remarkable. Lionel, through his daughter, has shared this all with me and given me permission to tell you it all. So Lionel Barry Agar, born and raised in York in England, and he grew up with an older brother who was a big Beatles fan, and that kind of filtered through to Lionel. He was a little bit young to remember most of it firsthand. Lionel's brother was a bit of an artist, and he painted one of his friend's bedrooms with all images of the Beatles. When Lionel saw photographs of what his brother had done, he said to him, "Why didn't you do it on a canvas in case he moves house?" And his brother said, "Well, I'm not doing it again." I guess this probably stuck with Lionel because cut to the early 1980s, Lionel's in his early 20s, and he decided he wanted to learn to paint. And the thing that he decided to paint, to see if he could do it, was the Beatles. And this painting was a result of that. So this was painted in the early 1980s. As we can see in the credits down in the bottom corner of the picture, it says L.B. Agar 8283. That's when this painting was made. Lionel's father died in December 1981, and it was January 82 when Lionel decided to start painting this painting, and he got hold of a big 8-foot long canvas to do the job. He started in black and white with oil paints over on the left hand side there, and gradually progressed to using colour once he'd sort of got an idea for the feel of the paints. Cut forward to February 1983, Lionel's mother passed away and she never got to see this painting, which was a big upset for Lionel, and he stopped for a little while and then sort of refocused and decided that what he wanted to do was make this painting for the Beatles. He wanted to get some acknowledgement from them. He wanted them to see it, and he felt that if they did get to see the painting, it would all be worth it. So the painting was finished by December 1983. Lionel had been working on this weekends, evenings, because he was working full time. He couldn't concentrate on it all day, every day. But by then it was finished, and his task was to get this to the attention of the Beatles. And boy did he succeed there. The next bit I'm going to read to you direct from the email that I got from Lionel, because I don't want to miss any of this out. In January 1984, I set off alone on the train to go to the big town of London to visit the Apple offices. I was hoping to meet Neil Aspinall, but unfortunately he'd suffered a heart attack the previous week and was recovering in hospital. I saw his secretary and accountant in his office instead. I presented my photograph of the Trojan Horse. He'd not taken the actual painting with him, he'd taken a photograph down to visit with them. Naturally they couldn't help me, but they showed me around the premises, including the gold discs on the wall, as compensation, which I really appreciated. They also showed me exactly where Neil had collapsed, his heart attack being so fresh to them. Yikes. I left my photograph with them and travelled home somewhat deflated, but I was optimistic that if anyone was going to help me in my quest, it would be Neil Aspinall. Now the story then moves on to the thing where some of you might have seen this picture before. So this picture was used inside and on the cover of a book called Art of the Beatles by Mike Evans. He was doing an exhibition in Liverpool, and a book then followed as a result of the exhibition, and this photograph was part of the exhibition and it was used as the cover of the book. So if you're thinking you've seen this picture before, it's almost certainly that's where you've seen it before. Now this painting was displayed in the exhibition, and it was alongside what some of you have probably heard of, a painting that the Beatles did. In Tokyo in 1966, when they were holed up in their hotel room, all four of them worked on a painting, sort of a corner each. And this was displayed, Lionel's painting was displayed alongside the Beatles painting at this exhibition in 1984. And the exhibition did really well. It went off on a world tour, so Lionel's painting went off all around the world, probably seen by thousands of people. Again, I'm going to read this next bit direct. While the painting was on tour in May 1987, Neil Aspinall and Derek Taylor both saw the Wogan show. UK chat show. Terry Wogan, legend, rest in peace. Which featured live coverage of the Christie's auction that turned out to sell the most expensive painting in the world to date, Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers. Derek Taylor later told me that he and Neil decided to buy my painting while I was an unknown artist because of the story of this sale. So Derek Taylor phoned me to tell me that he'd seen my painting in the Walker Art Gallery and wanted to know if I would like to sell it to Apple. I said that I would, but I would like Apple to merchandise it too. A price was agreed for the painting with Neil Aspinall. I went to London in August 1988 to collect the cheque. The painting had been delivered to Apple straight from the touring exhibition. So Lionel didn't get the painting back. Went straight from the exhibition, straight to Neil Aspinall at Apple. I was in the office with Neil and Derek talking about merchandising the painting, but said that they would discuss it later. Lionel then struggled to get conversations going with anybody at Apple about arranging merchandising for this painting. Lionel did hear from Derek Taylor in 1988 when Lionel got married with a congratulatory message, but never heard a thing after that. So Lionel was in London in summer of 1993, and he says here, I called into Apple to see my painting in the offices. I rang ahead. The secretary and Beatles photographer Tommy Hanley were there, but Neil Aspinall was at home. While I was there, I spoke to him on the phone thanks to his secretary. We exchanged pleasantries and I told him about a painting I was doing depicting the Queen. She also told me that when the three surviving Beatles and Yoko Ono met up to discuss the future of Apple Corps, she originally booked them into the Dorchester Hotel for lunch, but they all met up at the Apple offices instead and proceeded to film my painting with their personal camcorders. She said they were having such a good time they never made it to the Dorchester and the secretary had to go out and get sandwiches for them instead. There's a photograph of them from that day holding the camcorders, which they'd been filming this painting with. The photo was taken by Beatles photographer Tommy Hanley. He called the photo Get Back, sold the photo for £100,000 and retired on it. Nice work if you can get it. While he was there at the Apple office, Lionel also was shown the contents of Aunt Mimi's house. So Aunt Mimi had died a couple of years earlier. And all the contents of her house were being stored in the Apple offices until they presumably decided what they were going to do with it. There was all sorts of items there, including the plaque that John had made for Aunt Mimi that had the famous quote about,
"The guitar's all right for a hobby, John, but you'll never make a living at it."
So by this point in the early 1990s, the painting itself is owned by Apple. It had been purchased through Neil Aspinall, but they don't hold the copyright to it. That's still Lionel's to this day. But it means that because he's never been able to have this conversation with Apple about merchandising, he's not allowed to sell prints of this. I suspect that Lionel would probably still love to get some sort of merchandising deal done on this. So in the very vague, slim chance that anybody connected with Apple sees this video, I would love it if they took the opportunity to actually do some sort of deal with Lionel to get this available for people to buy, because it's a great painting and it's a great print of a great painting, and it really does deserve to be seen by more people than just those who were lucky enough, like I was a few weeks ago, to be handed a copy for free. Now, another really interesting thing about this painting, and I will let you make your own minds up about this, bear in mind that when this was bought by Apple, they're working on the Anthology. Now, it does make you wonder a little bit whether the final artwork for Anthology that Klaus Voormann did, that also has a very sort of striking left to right flow from early days through to the end of the Beatles, was it in any way inspired by this? Now, I don't know the answer to that. Probably the only person who knows that, the answer to that, is Klaus Voormann. Was he given a briefing to create something that could be cut up and used as album covers, but made one overall left to right, start to finish montage of the Beatles? Or is it complete coincidence? I don't know. I genuinely don't know the answer to that. I mean, I can understand completely why this wasn't used for the Anthology. It wasn't designed to be for album covers, and you probably couldn't have cut it up and used it in that way. But did the Beatles like that idea and then commission Klaus to do something of a similar nature that was specifically designed to be made into 3 album covers? I don't know. I will read you this bit as well, verbatim from this email, because it does tell quite a sad tale, and I have got permission from Lionel to tell you this. But it does say, after the deaths of Derek Taylor in 1997 and Neil Aspinall in 2008, in the spring of 2008, I again wrote to the new head of Apple requesting to know their position regarding merchandising the painting. To summarise their response, I am refused permission to merchandise the painting without licence from Apple, and their refusal stands to this day. To conclude, the initial print run of the Trojan Horse I made personally, hoping a deal with Apple would come to fruition, is now worthless. So instead of discarding them, I give them away to friends, family, and the odd acquaintance now and then until they're all gone. So that's the story of an incredible painting, and an incredible story behind it as well that goes right to the heart of Apple. I hope you've enjoyed that. I believe that's a story that you will not have heard before. So I want to say a big thank you to Lionel and to his daughter for the emails that we've had going backwards and forwards where they've been telling me the story. And let me know your comments down below about this. And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again soon. Bye.